Welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42, and today we're going to be taking a look at Ironsworn Delve, the expansion for Ironsworn Core. Let's delve right on into it. So here we have the Ironsworn Delve book. Again, this is written by Sean Tompkin from the core book with additional writing by Matt Click. And this was published back in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And like the core book, all of the art in here is going to be stock. So take that into consideration. And it is also the same black and white photoshopped images that we've come to expect from the previous entry. I really do enjoy the table of contents. It's very detailed, just like in the core book, and there's about 7 chapters this time around, or 8 chapters, including 2 appendixes and the index. And we're going to get right into the first chapter at the threshold. So just like with Ironsworn Core, the first chapter in Delve is simply a taste of what the new mechanics are in the book. And I do like that there's a little breakdown of what each of the chapters have in terms of content. It keeps things nice and organized. And speaking of organization, I really do like the overall layout of this book, specifically the first chapter. And this was something that I thought was real that they did really well in Ironsworn Core, where the first chapter kind of lays out the basic fundamentals and then they kind of expand on that in the subsequent chapters. And it's the same here. So there's going to be 7 new moves this time around to add to the overall setting of the game or the system of the game. So you have Discover a Site, Delve the Depths, Find an Opportunity, Reveal a Danger, Check your gear, Locate your objective, and Escape the Depths. And so these will be expanded upon later on in the book. So the Discover the Site move is particularly interesting because it is a beginning move. And when I mean beginning move, it's just like any other challenge. You pick a ranking and that kind of determines how quickly you progress through that site. So once again, the 5 different ranks are troublesome, dangerous, formidable, extreme, and epic. So that is still the same. And all of the mechanics are pretty much the same. There's really nothing outstandingly new except for some of the themes and domains, which we'll get into later, and how you roll on those. But I like that they don't really just give you something that's really out there, new to discover or to basically work out. After you discover a site, you're ready to actually go into the actual depths of this site, whether it's a dungeon or a cave or something else like that. So, when you discover a site, you have to choose a theme and a domain. And so there are 8 different themes, and a theme represents the condition or the state of the site. It also indicates the kinds of denizens and threats you might actually find there. Out of the 8, you have Ancient, which is the place holds the secrets of a bygone age. Corrupted, this place is tainted by dark magic. Fortified, Hallowed, Haunted, Infested, so foul creatures dwell there. Ravaged, so time and disaster or strife have taken their toll. And then Wild, where nature prevails in this place. And I'm actually going to, well, actually, I'll keep going because next is actually domains, and there's 12 of them this time around. So a domain is the physical characteristics of the site from its terrain and architecture. So you have a theme, which is your condition or the state, and then you have the domain, which is the physical characteristics. So like a barrow, the dead are enshrined here, a cavern, a frozen cavern, an ice reach. They really do like their ice and cold climates. Mines, pass, ruin, sea cave, shadow fen, which is a primeval marsh cloaked in mist, a stronghold, so like a fortress. Tanglewood, perilous forest of eternal shadow, and an underkeep, so a subterranean dungeon. So what you do, you discover a site, and then you have these. You basically pick, or you can roll for a theme or a domain. So I'm actually going to show you the actual supplement for this one. So just like with Ironsworn Core, you do have access, or you can actually buy these cards. You can also print these off for free if you get the PDF version, which if you get the book, you get the PDF for free. And these cards have the themes and the domains, just like you would find on the worksheet or the actual PDF or the domain printables. So you can see here that I have the theme here, and this one's ancient, and you have two different rollable tables on this one. The top part is features, which is actually 1 through 20, and then you have the bottom, which is dangers, and that's 1 through 30. So depending on what you're asked to roll on, so like if we're trying to find out what the features of this site is, then you would roll a 1D or a D100, and if it's 1 through 20, you would pick this one. And if it's 21 through 100, you would do the domain. So the domain has 21 through 100, and then 31 through 45 for the dangers, because for the dangers on the theme, you would have 1 through 30. So they kind of flip back and forth, so it's kind of a little confusing to kind of think of it this way, but if you look at it this way, so let's say that I'm just doing features. So you would kind of read it like this. So you would have your full 1D or percentage roll table right here. And you would pick whichever one it lands on. Likewise, if I'm doing dangers, then it would kind of go a little bit like this. And dangers are like foes and traps within the site itself. And so there's a card for each of the different themes and the domains, which I find very helpful because you can keep these beside you as you play along. And these cards actually do have the new moves as well as the rollable charts that you would need for those new moves. And they also have some blank ones here for when you want to create your own, which is actually really nifty or handy. Nifty is a pretty old word, so never mind. So like I said before when I was showing the cards, there is a worksheet that goes with this when you discover a site for the first time. And you can kind of see right here that this is the worksheet, and this actually keeps track of your progress within the site. So if you're doing a vow or a quest, you would keep progress here. You would also keep track of the different features and the dangers that you come across. This is also where you would keep track of the denizens, and denizens can be foes or allies that you can come across within the site. So it's a really cool, interesting way of playing and keeping track of things. It's very organized, and I do appreciate that. And the last couple pages kind of just describe how to fill in the worksheet. So kudos to them for actually taking the time to go over that. The last part of the chapter is the summary of what you just basically did before. And like in the previous video, I really wish this would have been at the front of the chapter just so I could get a clue at what's coming up instead of going to the back of the book or going to the back of the chapter and it's like, oh, this is what I just did. Oh, cool, I guess. I really would have appreciated if this was at the front of the chapter, but that's probably just me. And so then we get into the delve moves. Into the Depths is devoted to the 7 new moves within Delve that you can use. So discover a site. It's just like when you initiate a quest or a challenge, you determine its rank, just like what we learned in the first chapter. And progress is filled just like normal. The only difference this time around is that you can actually leave a site, but when you do so, you actually rewind some of your progress. You actually reset some of your progress, which can be detrimental. You have Delve the Depths, and this is used when you move into a new area within the site itself. So if we're going in through like a dungeon, this would be like going into a new area of the dungeon. You're actually going to roll a percentage die, and then you're going to consult the chart. So when you move into a new area, there are more opportunities to consult the oracle to determine what is in the area. The theme and domain cards also have this feature as well, so just remember that. You will actually consult the chart. So if we get a strong hit, you delve deeper and we find an opportunity. A weak hit, we actually check the chart we check the chart, and depending on which stat we actually used, will determine the kind of range. And then on a miss, we reveal a danger, so bad stuff happens to us. Finding an opportunity. Sometimes when you roll a strong hit or a move, you obtain an opportunity. If you're coming at this from the Delve the Depths move, you can envision what you find instead of having to roll, but it's just a percentage die roll and then you consult the chart. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Likewise, there's a reveal the danger, so if something bad happens, then we would roll a d100 and consult this chart. And this is usually triggered on a miss or on a weak hit. So again, roll that d100 and consult the chart. The thing about this one is you'll have to actually look between 3 different cards. You'll have to look at the reveal a danger card if you get above a 45, and you'll have to consult the theme card if you roll 1 through 30, or check the domain card if you get 31 through 45. And I find this whole process a little bit tedious, but I don't really see any other way they could pull this off. I don't know. It's just, if it has to be done, it has to be done kind of a thing. Is all there really is to say. Check your gear. This is roll to see if you have a specific helpful item. Like I had mentioned in the previous video, I really don't like the whole abstract nature of the equipment in general for this system. So this would be something that I would probably rework, and you actually can. There's actually some hints later on in the book that kind of gear you towards a more detailed equipment system. But I would probably really wouldn't use this all too often, just because I don't agree with it. Then you have locate your objective. This is a progress move, so that means when you are ready to actually progress in your vow or your quest within that site, you would make this move, and you would compare it to your progress tracker, just like when you're trying to fulfill a vow in the core rulebook. And depending on your strong hit, weak hit, or miss, you'll either be doing it all over again, or you would actually succeed. Escape the depths. This is used for when you need to flee from the site. And just remember that if you plan on coming back, you set back some of your progress. So you probably don't want to do it all the time, like in Pokemon when you're going inside of a cave and you fight an enemy and then you take a hit and you want to go all the way back to the Poké Center. You probably shouldn't do that here. It should also be mentioned that you cannot actually use this move if you're in a fight or if the objective of the site is to actually find a way out, because this is very abstract in a way. It's more of a montage than actually just a straight up backtrack. Of course, you can make other moves, and some of these other moves are in core itself. And I actually do find it neat that they kind of give you some hints and examples of what you can do. And then on this last page, we have the flow of play, which I actually really like. I like that they have these flows of plays spread out throughout the book. That way, like, if I'm doing a site run, I can just take a look at this and just get a quick view of all the steps that I would take. So like you start here, you do the discover a site move, you delve the depths. If it's a strong hit, follow this arrow. Weak hit, follow here. Miss, go here. And I really do appreciate that. This would be something that I would print off. And I actually kind of wish they had these as a card. That way I can just look at it when I'm playing instead of having to look through the book for these. And then we get a summary of the core terms. And I don't know why this is here. This is just a spread of a picture. And this actually isn't the only one. And the reason why this really confuses me is because the very next page, we start the next chapter. So I really don't know why this is kind of here. It just feels like wasted space, especially since this picture really doesn't have anything to do with what we were just talking about. So, yeah. And then we get to find our own path. Chapter 3 is Finding Your Path. If there was a chapter devoted to GM tips, this would be that chapter. There are some interesting options here, especially concerning mapping. One of my complaints with Ironsworn Core was that it was a little bit too abstract, and this one actually offers a way of making it a little bit more detailed with mapping. You can kind of see here on this page that they've kind of drawn a rough estimate of a map of where the player character has gone through. There's a cavern entrance, then there's some winding tunnels that lead to the depths. They meet a trail of blood which goes into the vast cave. There were some giant spiders that they fought, and then there was a dark pit that they could climb through, and then an underground river that leads to the lair of the Chimera. So it's a very quick way of doing it, and there's actually a map portion of the worksheet for a site, so you can actually totally do this. And I actually do like that this is here, that there is space on the worksheet for it, because really if I had to do a whole theater of the mind thing or just like a really rough abstract of mapping, then I really wouldn't even use any of this at all. But because they actually do offer tips and, it is sort of part of the game, I actually do enjoy having to go to a site and then mapping everything out. And the thing is, it's not linear at all, because you have like possibly a linear path that goes from a vast cave to the dark pit that goes to the underground river to the lair. But here you can also see that there are some parts that can actually branch off, like the winding tunnels that lead into the depths. You can go to another path, like let's say that this was a dead end. You can go back to the winding tunnels, take another path, and it kind of branches off that way. So you can totally do that. There's another type of map that they do, but this is in terms of relations between denizens, foes, and allies. And this would actually be good for just doing vows in general. And especially when we get into the main threat, which is described later in the book. But this is a very nice social way to spread out the social encounters that the player character goes through. So going back a little bit, they describe something called risk zones. So as you go deeper and deeper into let's say a dungeon, the ranking will actually increase. So this is an optional rule that you can use. So like if you're going through a mega dungeon, this would totally be something that you could pull off. For something a little smaller, for like your beginning ranks or sites, I probably wouldn't really use this, but it's really good that it's here because, as you go down into the depth, it's supposed to get harder, especially, or at least where games like Dungeons and Dragons are concerned, usually. There's a new move, or actually two new moves, but one is actually built off the other, called Learning from Your Failure. And this one's actually really interesting because this assumes that you're going to fail a lot, which could totally be the case. And as you fail in your vows or moves, you start to mark your failures. And after so many, you would actually turn them in for experience, like 3 experience or something like that. Up to 3 experience, I should say. So it's actually really interesting that they kind of accounted for that. I probably really wouldn't use that all too often unless it made sense in the narrative. And of course, we go back to the narrative because this game is all about the narrative. So there's some options for streamlining dice rules. I really didn't care too much about those. And then, of course, there are some options for breaking down sites, playing without themes and domains, or actually using multiple themes and domains. And when you actually use multiple themes and domains, it's so let's say that I'm using 2 themes. I would choose one theme to be odds and the other theme to be evens. That way when I roll my percentage die, if it turns up on the theme side, if it's even, it would go to the even card. If it's odd, it would go to the odd card. So it's just a quick way of making or being able to use multiple themes or multiple domains, because it works the same as domains as well. So, and then of course you have blank ones, and there are some hints and tips for creating your own themes and domains, and it kind of breaks it down, like 1 through 4 is going to be a rare feature and stuff like that. So very, very interesting, these different types of rules. And then of course there's just some more GM tips for like delves as journeys and one-shot delves and stuff like that. And then we get to probably one of the cool parts of the book, and those are the sites themselves. So the first 3 chapters had some pretty cool title names But now you can tell things are getting serious because we have a one-word chapter title: sites. And that's what this chapter is about. It's about sites. And this first thing off, this chapter actually does ask you to consider what's true in your world. So if you remember back in the core rulebook, in the GM section part of the book, when you're creating your own world, you determine what's true and what's a rumor. And so this actually kind of goes back on that and says, okay, what is true in your world? What's rumors and what's not going to happen? And they ask you to consider that because some things you might actually find in your world that is true. Like, let's say magic is real. And so you might say that, okay, there's going to be undead in this barrow, which you can totally do. Or if it's not true, if it's more of a rumor, then you would hear rumors of undead, but it really wouldn't be true. It would just probably be some cannibals or something like that. So this is an explanation of all of the themes and all of the domains, which is actually needed even though it's repeated information, because it does give you the cards themselves and what's on the cards for the rollable tables. So if you're purely using the book, which I highly rule against, this is where you would find the information on those cards. I would honestly, if I didn't have the cards themselves, I would just print off the actual PDF pages of the cards themselves and just cut them out and do that. And by far, one of the most useful features of this chapter are the actual site starters. So you don't actually have to come up with your own sites, although I would highly encourage you do because it makes it more unique to your situation. But these site starters are just that. They're starters. And if you're using the actual default setting, then there's a map with the actual site starters pinned on them. So if you happen to be in that area, then you might actually find Alva's Rest. And so each of these site starters has the ranks, the themes, and the domains to look for, as well as the denizens, which is also separated by its rank. So very common, common, uncommon, 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 rare, and then rare. There is also that. They've actually quite done that for you. And they also give you a little bit of a summary as what is in that site. So that's actually pretty cool. And there's quite a few number of them. There's like 20, exactly 20 of them. So you could use them if you're in a pinch, or maybe not if you don't want to. I actually found this to be quite useful. And then we get into the Denizens chapter. So a denizen is basically a foe or somebody who lives in that site or is in that site. It could be an ally, it could be a foe, it could be a neutral party involved. So not only does this chapter contain new foes to use for Ironsworn, it also has the Denizen Matrix. And the Denizen Matrix is actually on the site worksheet. So it actually separates your denizens between very common, common, uncommon, rare, and unforeseen. It's actually like at the top of the site worksheet. And this keeps track of who's in that site. Like I mentioned before, there can actually be non-hostile denizens, and they can actually be helpful or they can be a hindrance, but you could actually roll on the oracle to see what their disposition is towards you, and that's probably what I would use them as. Unless it's like an ally that I've encountered before that happens to be here, then they would already have a pre-establishing disposition. When I was reading through this part the first time around, I actually had this thought where it was like, man, that's actually a lot of work to put into setting up a game. And actually, that's quite true. Playing this game is a time investment, and actually just any RPG is a time investment. And you always hear about dungeon masters and Dungeons and Dragons boasting about how many hours they put into the next session of a game, but this is something that's meant to be played solo, and already the setup is quite extensive, especially if you're going into a new site, because you're going to have to actually decide what is populating your denizens. So I actually have one of two recommendations. Either create a master list of foes sorted by areas, so that if you're going into like, let's say I'm going into a place in the wild, I might have some creatures that would that I might find in the wild. And I would just kind of, roll on that table and then plug them in because there isn't really an oracle that separates into that, which is actually unfortunate. My second recommendation is to leave some spots blank. And that way, when you consult the oracle, if you should roll on that, that's when you would decide or make another roll to see what actually populates that specific spot on the defense matrix. Because if you have to do this, if you go on a lot of delves, this can actually get quite tedious. And nobody likes tediousness in an RPG game. So the last part of the chapter is about anomalies, and anomalies are a nice change from foes, but I can't honestly see myself using very many of these because they're kind of out there. So, for example, let's take this more. That's actually one that I probably wouldn't use, but let's take this Circle of Stones. The Circle of Stones is marked as a rank dangerous, and its features are ancient stones etched with mysterious symbols, whispers of old magic, visions of hoarded memories, and really, this doesn't seem like anything outright bad. Not really a hindrance. This would be equivalent to going out in Skyrim and seeing one of those obelisks of power that you can just, interact with and gain some sort of a benefit. I really don't see this as a danger, and some of these I actually really don't see as much of a danger. I much would have preferred it if they had more things like natural disasters like maelstroms and tempests, which is probably what I would use from this chapter. But I really wouldn't use some of these other ones. Like, yeah, Bloodthorns, that's pretty cool to have. I mean, if you're going in a marsh type, you might encounter like all these like thorny brambles and stuff like that you need to navigate through. But some of these other ones are just kind of really out there or very specific. Then we get to threats. So threats are like the final boss of a quest. And that's kind of pretty much all there is to it. Sometimes you'll use this optional rule and sometimes you won't, but a threat is somebody that actually acts against your agenda, and they actually do have their own progress tracker in a way. And if you're inactive or you fail to do something, then they actually get to progress on their progress tracker. They get to advance their threat. And so there are some new moves here that kind of go along with that. It's an interesting concept, but once again, you're not really going to use it all the time, just in some cases, like if you're fighting a bandit or if you have a vow including or involved with a bandit raiding party or something like that, then you might have a threat. Or if somebody's working against you, then you might have a threat. Other than that, this is part of the book where we get into just like, things that they probably should have included in the first book, but they're including it now, kind of a deal. And then we get to objects of power. So, equipment has always been an abstract concept in Ironsworn, and this chapter creates sort of a happy medium between the two. For those that are wanting something a little bit more detailed and still keeping some of the abstract sort of play. Wealth is introduced here, and wealth is an abstract representation of bartering power. The new Fortune Hunter asset actually makes use of this, and it can be used in a variety of ways, such as spending it when you make a compel move, so that would be like equivalent to bribing somebody. It's like honestly, I really wouldn't even take this as an asset unless I was really creating a character where narratively it would fit. So, yeah. Then we get to artifacts, and artifacts serve as the focus of a quest. So think of like the One Ring of Power from the Lord of the Rings, and that's pretty much what an artifact is. It's something that is beneficial to you solving a quest or a vow. There are some sample artifacts as well, which is pretty nice, and they even offer some hints as to how you would use this artifact in a story. And then we get rarities, and rarities are enchanted objects, and these enhance your assets in some way. You can either find these through quest, or you can buy them through experience points, which kind of really just takes me out of the narrative when you use it that way. But rarities are unique in that whenever you use the enchanted item to make a move, I have to roll my action die and my 2d10s. You actually would replace your action die with a different d6, basically. And if you roll a 6, you automatically get a strong hit on that specific roll. So they can be pretty powerful, but that's only really a 1 in 6 chance of actually procking it. You also get +1 momentum when you roll a 6, so I guess there's that too. So I'm actually a little torn about the use of rarities, only because they all seem to do the same thing. Roll a d6. If you roll a 6, you get a strong hit +1 momentum. And the only thing that really changes is the narrative, which you can kind of see here in the boxes or the descriptions of some of these rarities. I would have liked to have seen some more examples where there are more unique mechanical effects. Then again, I'm pretty sure you can just create your own, but it is kind of a little bit disappointing that, these magic items kind of all function the same way. And then the last chapter, of course, like in Core, was about oracles. So just like in the core book, this chapter is a series of rollable tables that serve as the oracle. And if you watched that previous video, you already know my opinion. But to reiterate, the oracle really makes solo and cooperative play possible in this system. Without it, the game would be bland. It'd be like eating food without any seasoning, and nobody really, well, I guess some people do like that, but I definitely don't know anybody that likes that. So the oracle is organized into the following sets: features, site names, site nature, characters, monstrosities, traps, combat events, and threats. I really never see a reason to have like names as rollable tables, because there's so many rollable tables that you can do, that you can find on the internet or stuff like that. I much probably would have replaced that with, a monster or a foe table specific to a theme or a domain. That way it would make the process of filling out that worksheet a little bit faster. But oh well. What you get here are just some rollable tables that can help you in some way. It works for certain situations. It's not going to be a catch-all. And, like I said, I think one of the most useful features isn't actually here, and that is that monster or that foe table that's sorted by themes and domains. But we also get another spread of a picture before we get into the appendix, which I still don't know why they're wasting space like that. Here we have the appendix. So you got reiteration of delve moves and some of the optional moves, and then you get an index, which, just like in core, I really don't see the need for the index because the table of contents is just so good. Like, it's so specific. So I really never found a use for the index when I played, and I actually haven't used delve. Here are my final thoughts. Delve is a very unique expansion. It isn't really needed, but having it does improve gameplay to a certain extent. You won't use all of the new features every time, but when you do, it'll be like a breath of fresh air. It'll be like something new. It's like eating an Oreo cookie after you haven't had an Oreo cookie in like over a couple years. My recommendation is to start playing without any of the new stuff in the book. I would just start with core. And as you get used to how to play within the narrative and I would actually slowly find ways to implement some of the new features. I wouldn't use them all, like, at the get-go. Would I recommend this? Yes, but only if you really enjoy Ironsworn and all of its concepts, because that is what you're getting here. There are no reworkings of systems, which I'm a little bummed about, because I really didn't like combat, and I don't like how equipment and wealth is treated. I want a little bit more detail. And I know that some people would really like that about this system, but for me, that just kind of really kicks the bucket. And I did have fun when I played the core. It just took a little bit of time to actually get my brain in that mindset that when I'm doing combat, I'm supposed to be filling out progress. I'm not really defeating an enemy, so to speak. I would actually personally rework some of these mechanics, specifically combat and the equipment and wealth, but it can be done. It's just going to take a little bit of work. And again, this system is made to be broken down and pieced back together the way you want, just like in any good RPG. And that's what makes this product or these two products worth trying out, especially if you find yourself alone or unable to play with other people, or you have anxiety about playing with other people like I do. So this would be something definitely to kind of delve into. You see what I did there? And also, like I said in the previous video, this is actually really good for, journaling or writing stories based on your adventure. It's just a quick way of actually getting those ideas out there. So that's all I have for this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Give this video a huge thumbs up to support this series, and subscribe if you would like to see more. I will see you guys in the next video.